One of my favorite YouTubers, Gary Simon over at designcourse.com, just released two epic crash courses on YouTube. The first one is on design, where he goes inside Figma and teaches you all kinds of design principles on how to lay out a really nice web page. In the second video, he actually hand codes that entire page using VS Code. And as I was watching those videos, I thought to myself, I wonder if I could do this inside of WordPress and GenerateBlocks. So I reached out to Gary to ask for permission before I did this, and thankfully he was super cool and said yes. So today that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Now, if you haven't seen Gary before, there's links to both of these videos down below in the video description, and he has an amazing UX UI course that I'm a student of myself. It's got all kinds of great interactive challenges inside of it, and I have learned a ton going through that course. Hopefully, I'll put some of those principles into play today. But be sure to go to both the links down in the video description and see exactly how Gary designed all this in Figma and how he coded it all out. With that, let's go ahead and get started on the WordPress version. First things first, let's take a look at the actual design we're going to be working on. We have a header with a menu up here with a few little interactions. We have a 2-column hero section with some text, buttons, and a little call out on the left-hand side. And then these cards on the right-hand side that have some interactions on hover. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and dive into WordPress. So I have gone ahead and installed the GeneratePress theme. I have that activated. And then I have the GenerateBlocks and GenerateBlocks Pro plugins added. I am using alpha versions on this install, but since this is coming down the pike pretty soon, I figured I might as well get used to it. I also have the Pro version of the GeneratePress theme, and I installed the SVG support plugin because I wanted to upload this media, and thankfully Gary provided some nice SVGs for this. So all that media is all in place already. Lastly, the only other thing I did was create a default layout element, and all this is doing is saying that I don't want any sidebars. Go ahead and disable the content title and make the content area full width. And I've just applied that to all the pages on the site. We're just building out this one page, so that's good enough for now. But other than that, I haven't set anything else up. So I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and start with the header, since we have to do this completely separately, mostly through the customizer, and we need to write some code. I'm gonna go ahead and start with that, and then we'll jump into the actual page content. So let's get started. We'll jump into the customizer here. The first thing we can do is go ahead and hide the site title and select our logo. We'll skip cropping on that. And we can size this here. Now I could go back and forth here to this Figma file and make sure I have everything exactly the same. But I think what I'll do is probably for the most part, just kind of use my eyeball to size things up. This isn't really about replicating this design 100%. It's just about getting the general idea down. So we'll go ahead and leave this. In fact, it looks a little bit small on my screen, so I might go with something like 150 on that. All right, we got the logo in there, and that will automatically link back to the home page. Now we can go ahead and work on the menu. So we'll go in here to the menus and we'll create a new menu. We'll call this primary, and we'll label this as our primary menu. And now we need to add the pages to it. So go ahead and hit add items. We'll take a look here. We have home, products, gallery, and contact. So we'll add home, gallery, products, and contact. Double check I have those in the right order. It's actually products, then gallery. So we'll swap those around here. And we have all of our menu items in here. Now I think for the most part, we're gonna go ahead and lay things out and then come back and do the styling. But since all of this styling has to be done here in the customizer anyways, and we're already here, we'll go ahead and set some of this up. So we can go here in the typography, and we need to add a couple fonts. So there's two fonts on this project. The first one is Poppins. They're both Google fonts, so we can bring those directly in here. And the second font is Playfair Display. So we got both of those loaded in. And for our menu here, we want to go ahead and make that Poppins. So I'm going to scroll down here to primary menu items, and I'm going to select Poppins. Now again, we could go check the exact font sizes, but these look fairly decent, so I'm just going to leave them as is. We do want to change the text transform to uppercase. And then we want to give this just a little bit of space in between these letters. Anytime you do all capital letters like that, it is nice to just give it a little bit of letter spacing in between them. It makes them nice and easy to read. So now that we got those changes done, we can jump into the colors here for the navigation. And under primary navigation, I'm just going to make sure that all of these, the the initial color, the hover color, and the current page color is already set to this darker color we have here, which it is, so we're good to go. Now, inside this drawing here, you can see the current page has a little underline. And if we actually go and check out this prototype, you can see that when we hover over the other items in the menu, they get an underline as well. Now, I noticed in Gary's video, these actually animate, and then here inside this prototype, they don't, but we'll go ahead and do the animation as well. So for this part of it, we're actually going to have to write quite a bit of CSS because most of these options are not available inside the customizer, but most of it's pretty simple. It just has some long selectors, but I'll try to explain this as I go. So the first thing we want to do is give the little underline to the current item. So what we're going to do here is do .main-navigation, then we'll do main-nav. Inside that, we want the UL, and inside that, we want the LI. And then anytime you're on a current page, there's a current page item class added to that menu item. So right after that LI, I can do current, if I spell it right, current underscore page underscore item. And so this is going to target whatever page we're on. Now, inside the customizer right now, I'm not on any of these pages. So we'll go ahead and click the home page. And just to show you this is working, I could do display none, and you can see that home page goes away. And if I swapped over to the products page, that one would go away since we're hiding the current page. So we know that's working now. And the way we want to do this underline is actually through a pseudo element. So I'm going to do :after on this selector here. And what we need to do for this is we want to set the position to absolute. We want to set the content to blank, so we'll just do empty quote mark there. The width, if I remember correctly, is 30%. The height, we'll start with 2 pixels and see if that works. The background color is going to be black. We actually need that to match our text color. I'll grab those variables here in a second. We can make those match exactly. Now you can see we already have a problem here because this underline is actually over to the side further than we need it to be. And that's because by default, all these menu items have a width. So what we need to do is go back in here into layout and then primary navigation. And here under menu item width, we just need to get rid of that default. We can change that to a 0. And you can see now the underline looks better. It's still a little bit too far away from the letters, so we can close that up by changing this menu item height. I don't know, something like 34 pixels looks pretty decent. But of course, now we have the problem is there's no space in between these different menu items. And actually to fix that, we need to write CSS as well. So we'll jump back in here into the additional CSS. I'm going to put this line just before it. So to do this, we're going to do main-navigation, main-nav, do the UL, the LI. And because we're going to be adding some margin here, you'll see if we just did margin right 32 pixels, we get our space in there, but we're actually getting some extra margin over here. You just can't see it right now, but it's actually giving us some margin before that container. So what we want to do is on this LI, we want to do a colon and do a not selector. And inside there, we can do colon last child. And that way we're giving this spacing to all of them except the last item here. So now that we have that fixed, we can go about fixing up some of the rest of this. What we want to do is when we hover on any of these, we want to get this same underline, but in a lighter gray color. So what I'm going to do is just grab this entire selector here and copy it. We'll paste it down here and we'll get rid of this current page class. And we'll just say main navigation, the UL, the LI, and we want this on hover. So we can do colon hover colon after. So we're combining some of these here, but it should work to show that underline now when we hover. Now, of course, we want this to be kind of a gray color. So I'm going to change this just to gray for now. And that seems to be working perfectly. Now, like I said, in Gary's video, he actually had some animations for this, which I think look really nice. So what I'm going to do is just copy this one we just wrote and paste it in here right above. I'm going to get rid of the hover and I'm going to change this width to 0%. So right now those lines do exist, but they're 0% wide, so you can't see them. And what I can do is add a transition on here. We'll say 200 milliseconds all ease in. And now when we hover over it, you'll see we have this nice little grow animation. And that looks a lot nicer. So of course, when we go from one page to the other, the current page gets the black underline, and when we hover over the other ones, they get the nice gray one. Now, before we go out of here and say that this is finished, let's go ahead and grab these color variables. So for our darker color, we want this variable that's contrast, which you can see named here. And maybe for the underline, we can do this contrast 3. So I'm going to go back into our CSS here, and instead of black, we're going to do var, open parentheses, dash dash, and this was called contrast. So now that should match that same color there. And then for the gray, we'll do var, open the parentheses, dash dash, contrast 3. Go ahead and copy that value here so I don't have to type it again. And we can put it down here on this hover as well. And so now these colors should match up a little bit better. With that, we have everything done for the header part of this project. Just like in Gary's video, he didn't tackle all the responsive stuff. We won't do that here in this video either, just for time purposes. But for the desktop version, this seems to be working exactly like we'd want. So let's go ahead and jump out of here, and we'll go into the back end of WordPress. I want to go ahead and set this home page as the home page of our site. So we'll click here under your home page displays. We'll click static page, and we'll choose home. And we can go ahead and save this. And now when we go to view the site, we can see that we're currently on the home page right now. So let's go ahead and edit this page. Now, as Gary mentioned in his video, basically everything inside of web design is just boxes within boxes within boxes. So the first thing I like to look at when I'm recreating a page like this is what kind of boxes do I need? Obviously, we already have the header section completed, so we're really just focused down here. What we can see is we have a contained section. It doesn't go all the way to the edge of our viewport here, so we need some kind of container. Then within that, we kind of have a 2-column grid with this stuff on the left and this all on the right. And in this right-hand column, we actually have 2 columns in there. So there's a couple different ways we can tackle this. I think what we'll do is take advantage of some of the new flexbox controls inside of GenerateBlocks, and we can tackle it that way. So let's go ahead and drop in a container, and we'll need an inner container in that to control the width of our section. Now, like I said, we're going to have 2 different columns here. So the way I'll do that is to drop in a container inside of it and duplicate it. So we have 2 inside here. We'll go to the parent column. I'll go ahead and pop open the list view here so it'll be easier to tell what I'm selecting. And here's where we're going to take advantage of some of the new flexbox controls inside of GenerateBlocks. So we're going to change this to display a flex, which will put these 2 items next to each other. We're also going to grab each one of these containers and change their width to 45%. And we'll go back to the parent container and make sure that we have this set to space between so we get the gap in between these 2 columns. Now this first column is pretty simple. We have a headline, some text, 2 buttons, a container with 2 columns inside of it. So let's go ahead and at least get those blocks on the page. So we'll do a headline, change it to an H1. We'll do another headline and change it to a paragraph. Underneath that, we'll add a button and duplicate it so we have 2. Then we'll add a container, and inside that container, we'll add a 50-50 grid. Inside there, we just need another heading, again, a paragraph, and one inside here that's a paragraph. And that'll give us all the blocks we need for this section. So let's go ahead and start styling it. The first thing I want to do is add just a little bit of padding in here to give ourselves some breathing room. So I'm going to do maybe 80 on the top and 24 on the left and right. Now we can copy and paste some of this text. As you can see, we are using the default typography, but we'll go back and fix all of that inside the customizer here in just a bit, where we can change all those things globally instead of changing them individually on each individual element. For now, we'll just go ahead and copy and paste in all this text, and then we can get to styling it a little bit more. So this first H1's okay. Once we fix that typography, it'll be good. Here, I do want a little bit more space in between this text and these buttons. So I'm going to click on this paragraph, and I'm going to give it maybe 60 pixels of bottom margin to push those buttons away. Same here on this container. I want to push this away from the button, so I'm going to give it maybe 48 pixels of top margin. Now for this first button here, I want to go ahead and grab this color. We won't do everything exactly perfect, but we'll go ahead and grab this hex color here and change the background color here. And for hover, we'll just use the same color, but make it slightly darker. For the text, we'll change it to black. And we'll give our border radius maybe 8 pixels. Now we need a little bit of space in between these buttons, so I'm going to give the first one 16 pixels of right margin to push it away. And the second button is going to be transparent background. So we'll go ahead and make both of these transparent and make the text the dark color from our library. Now his button has an arrow next to it. We can go down here to the icons and we can pick from some of these icons, but none of them match quite the same. So what I'm going to do is zoom in here, select that arrow, right click it and hit copy as SVG. This way I can go back into this icon SVG HTML, paste it in, and then move it to the right hand side. So another nice thing about this button is when you hover over it, the little arrow moves to the right. Well, we can accomplish this pretty easily with the effects panels inside GenerateBlocks. So with that button selected, we'll go in here and we'll add a transform. We're going to choose the type as translate. We're going to do it on the state of hover, and we're going to target the icon. What we want to do is translate the X, we'll say maybe 6 pixels. So now when we hover, you can see that arrow is moving. It's not very smooth, but if we add a transition to it, maybe set this to 0.3 seconds and target the icon, this will move nice and smooth. Now we just need to style up this container here. First, we'll give it just a little bit of padding all the way around it. We'll give it a border, and we'll give it 16 pixels of border radius. This text here we won't be able to control in the customizer since it's kind of one-off. So we'll just go ahead and give it a font size of 48 pixels. And since the top of these two aren't lined up, that's because of the line height on this bigger font. So we'll just change the line height to 1. Now we need this container, this left-hand column here, to shrink down to the size of the content. So to do that, we just need to select that container and delete out this width. It automatically came in 50 as part of this grid. And if we just delete that out of there, it will go ahead and shrink. Now we need the right-hand column to grow, so we can grab it and go up here to Layout, Flex Child, and put it to grow. Now we just need a little bit of space between those. So maybe we'll do 24 pixels of horizontal gap between them, and that looks pretty good. Now every headline block is going to inherit what you have in the customizer for bottom margin. So I'm just going to go ahead and zero both of these out so we get a nice even white space around that whole container. Now I'm sure you noticed in Gary's design, he has some confetti around it. We're going to do that later with CSS. So for now, I think this section is pretty much done. Go ahead and bold that text. Now we're going to get to the fun section over here on the right where we have these cards. So let's take a look at what we're going to try to accomplish. First, we need this large card that spans the entire height of this left column, and then 2 smaller cards next to it. Now, in the prototype, it does grow when you hover, and we can accomplish this with GenerateBlocks. However, in setting up this demo, I found a bug inside this alpha version that actually screws a few things up. So I'm going to show you how to do it, but we're going to have to turn it off to actually get through this tutorial. But know that this is definitely something that will be fixed by the time you're watching this video. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is drop 2 containers in here. I'll drop in one and duplicate it. Now we can go to the parent container that's housing both of these and change this position to flex. This will put these 2 next to each other. Now we do want some gap in between them. We'll do maybe 16 pixels in between the both of them, and we'll change both of them to 50% wide. So we'll do 50%, grab this one, and also do 50%. So now we have these 2 columns here. So for this first one, let's go ahead and grab an image. It's the image of these shoes, and we can drop it in there as the background image. We need to give it the border radius. We'll do 16. And we need to give it a little bit of padding, maybe 16 pixels. Now here, the text that goes inside of these cards is actually inside of a white background. So to accomplish that, we need to drop in a container, and we'll change the background to white. Inside here, we'll give this some border radius. Since we did 16 on the outside, we'll go a little bit smaller here, maybe 12, and we'll give it maybe 16 pixels of padding inside of it. In fact, I think the top and bottom probably don't need that much. Maybe we go with 8. We can always play around with that in a bit. Now we do need 2 columns of text in here, so I'm going to go ahead and drop in a grid, and we'll just go with 50-50 for now, and we'll get our text in there. So the first one, a headline, we'll make it a paragraph. This says Foxica Sport, and underneath it, it says running shoe. Again, both of these have the bottom margin on them, so we'll need to get that off of there. And this one is actually bold, so we'll go ahead and highlight all of that and make it bold. Now, over in this column, we need to add another headline. We'll change it to paragraph. We'll make the text say $48 and get rid of the bottom margin. Now, as you can see, these are taking up equal widths, and in the design, the text for the title of the product takes up a lot more room. So we can do that again with the flex shrink and flex grow. What I'll do is grab this container around the $sign, and we'll get rid of all of the width. So we'll change the width completely out of there, and that will make it shrink. Now we can grab this one and actually go up to the flex child and make it grow. Now this column on the left, we're going to use to do this little divider line between the two. So to do that, I'll go to this border and I'll give it a 1 pixel border, and we'll change the color to one of these light gray colors. Of course, it's too close to this text over here, so I'm going to grab this text and give it maybe 16 pixels of left margin just to get that outline away from it. So that looks pretty good. Now, this text needs to actually go down to the bottom of this container. So to do that, we can grab this container with the background, and we can change the display to flex, make sure it's set to column, and we'll justify this content to the end. That way it goes to the bottom of this box. You can see here his price is actually center aligned in here, so we can go back to this grid and change the vertical alignment to center. And that basically fixes up this card. Now I'm going to show you how we would do the background animation, but like I said, we're going to have to turn this off because of the bug I ran into. So what we would do is go down here into Effects and choose Transform. Inside the Transform, we'll choose the type of scale, and the state will be hover, and the target is going to be the background image. We can say 1.2 maybe. So now when we hover over it, you can see that background image is scaling. Of course, we don't want it to go outside the bounding box of the actual element, so we can change this overflow to hidden, and now it stays within there. Of course, we want one of those smooth transitions, so we'll turn on the transition, make sure this is set to background image, and now we have a nice little transition. We'll go ahead and have to turn these off for now and set this overflow back to default because that's where I run into the bug. But once this is fixed, you'll be able to leave it just as is. Now that that's set up, we can just go ahead and copy this entire block and reuse it for these other two. So what I'll do is just add a container inside this right column and paste in that block. This one was set to 50%, so we need to go here and make this 100% now, since we want it to take up this full width. And we can grab it and duplicate it to have a second one here. Now, as you can see, it doesn't look quite right, but we can fix that by setting this right column to flex as well. So what I'll do is just make sure that I'm on that right column. We'll go up here to the display and set it to flex, and set it to column, and set it to space between. Now we're going to need to match the gap in between these two cards to this, and I used 16 before, so we'll use 16 again. To get these to fill up the space, we'll grab this first one, and we'll go down to the height and set it to 50%. We'll go to the second one and do the same thing. So now this sets up in a nice little grid. Now in Gary's example, I believe he did use CSS Grid. That would be great here, but unfortunately we don't have those controls baked into the UI at this time. We'll go ahead and just change out these images. I believe we have the sweaters on top and then the jacket on the bottom. We can save this, open this up in a new tab, and we have our layout nearly completed. Now, before we start writing the CSS for the rest of this, let's go ahead and jump into the customizer and get our fonts set up. So go in here to typography. We'll add in here for the body, we're going to set it to Poppins. That will change all the fonts in here to Poppins. Now, if this was a real project, of course, you'd want to go through everything and set up the typography, but the only other element we have here is the H1. So I'm going to go ahead and style that, which is Play Fair Display, and I believe it's about 54 pixels. Go ahead and publish that. Take a look again at the front end, and now we have everything working just like we wanted. The last thing we need to tackle is the little confetti here, which you can see inside this drawing, and of course this price tag. So what we need to do for those is write some CSS and use the pseudo selector for after or before. So what I'm going to do is grab this container, we'll scroll down here to the advanced, and we'll add a class called confetti. And here on this right-hand column, I'm going to grab the outermost container, and I'm going to call this one price tag. We'll go ahead and update that. We can go back and jump into the customizer to write our last little bit of CSS. First, for the confetti, we'll set the position to relative, which you can do in the UI now. I'm just creature of habit and been doing it this way for so long. Then we need to do confetti after and set the position to absolute. We need to set the content to a blank string here. Oops. We'll set the width to maybe 100 pixels, the height to 100 pixels, and we need to get a background image. So for here, we'll do background image, open parentheses, and open quote marks, and we need to go hunt down these assets. So we'll go in here to the media library, we'll grab our confetti and copy that URL, and we'll paste it here just inside these quotes. And you can see our confetti is now showing up, and all we need to do is position it. So we'll do a top of maybe -25 pixels and a left of -25 pixels, just so it kind of overlaps that corner. And just to be sure, we can do a background size of cover and a background position of center, and a background repeat of no repeat. In fact, we might want to change this cover to contain just to make sure none of those get chopped off. And that looks pretty good. We're going to go through the same exact process for the price tag, so I'm just going to copy this down. We'll go in here to this first confetti and we'll change this to price tag, and we'll go to the second one here and change it to price tag as well. So now you can see our confetti showing up here. All we need to do is go back here to the price tag SVG, copy that, paste it in here, and let's play around with the size a bit. Let's try 200 for the width and maybe 150 for the height. That looks pretty good. And instead of being negative for the top, maybe we do 25 pixels down and maybe 50 pixels over. So looking at that, we're looking pretty good. It's not an exact duplicate, but it's a pretty close recreation. Another huge thanks to Gary for allowing me to do this. It was a lot of fun building out your design inside of my stack. If you'd like to see how to build some more things inside of GenerateBlocks, I got a couple videos popping up here, and make sure to hit subscribe so we can catch you in the next one.